All right. Well, hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. And my name is Carrie McDonald. I'm with the People's Budget, the Malden People's Budget process. I'm here with Councillor Ryan O'Malley. Welcome, Councillor. Glad to be here with you.
Hi everyone. Nice to be here.
We are really grateful for you to spend a little time chatting with us today. The People's Budget is a grassroots led push in Malden to ask the people who live and work here how we think the city should spend our money and what's important to invest in to create a progressive, inclusive community. So the process was started by a group called Malden Police Alternatives and Accountability that I work with, but is also including a whole range of other organizations and communities in Malden that are getting the word out. And we want to encourage everyone to be able to take the survey to get involved in the city. So we'll report the results to the mayor and the city council for the budget process next year. And Councillor, you're going to help us understand what that city budget process is and how it works. And just to clarify right up front, your conversation with us today is not any endorsement of any particular piece of the budget or any particular proposal. It's just to help people engage with what that process is in their civic life.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for clarifying that. I think educating our community about how people get involved and how we spend our money in the city of Malden is really crucial to participation.
Yeah, that's great. So a budget is just a plan for what you're going to spend based on how much money you have. And the city of Malden does a budget every single year. And so, Councillor O'Malley, how does the budget process work in the city of Malden?
Well, I did draft up a little presentation, so why don't I share that? I think I'm a visual learner, so hopefully this will help people kind of visualize the process here. So I think the question to be asked kind of is, how does the city develop its annual budget? And for me, it's taken me a few years. I've been on the city council now for 5 years. Um, that whole time to really understand how does this process work? What are the ins and outs, and what are kind of like the unwritten rules, and what exactly is going on? Um, Basically, you'll see here. The process is, primarily driven by the mayor. The first step here is the mayor, who's currently Gary Christenson. He drafts his budget, and he proposes that, to the city council sometime between, or it's drafted between January and April. Step two, I mean, I guess maybe it's just helpful for me to go over the overall gist of this. Step two is that the mayor will then meet with the council president, who's currently Councillor Neil Anderson of Ward 7, and with the chair of finance, who is currently Barbara Murphy, the Ward 5 city councilor. And they'll discuss their priorities for the coming year, and that approximately happens between February and April. Step three is that the mayor will send his budget down to the city council after that initial discussion with the council president and chair of finance. And it's referred to the finance committee for review and a public hearing. And that approximately happens between April and June. And step four is that the finance committee will review the budget and propose modifications. Potential modifications could include cuts. It can include transfers from one account to a different account, or it could even be an addition. Now, the crucial thing here is that the mayor must approve any transfers or additions, but the mayor does not have to approve cuts. And
Wait. I want to make sure I'm understanding that, Councillor. So the city council can reduce the amount of money in a given area or department, but it can't add more money or take money from one place and move it to another unless the mayor approves that.
Exactly. And then that process and that review process does involve calling in all the department heads and having a one-on-one discussion with them about what their departmental budget looks like. What are some of the things that they are needing, and what are some of the things that they think could improve? And that happens from May to June, with the goal of passing the budget in a final format by June 30th. Step five is that within 45 days of the mayor sending the budget down to the city council, it must be finally acted upon by either approving it or rejecting it. And if no action is taken within 45 days, the budget is automatically approved. If for some reason we don't approve a budget or say we reject the budget, before June 30th, and we go to July 1st, that's a new fiscal year. And the mayor then has to propose a 1/12 budget, which is pretty much the annual budget divided by 12, and is not a pretty thing to deal with.
Wow. Yeah. So the budget applies to things that start July 1 and then go all the way to the next June 30th. That's the fiscal year. We're having this conversation in January of 2021. So the upcoming budget we're talking about is actually, we call it fiscal year 22. Is that right? Because it ends in 2022.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's Malden's fiscal year. That's the state of Massachusetts fiscal year. The federal fiscal year is a little bit different.
Just for fun.
Just to make it easy.
That's great.
I also have a little flow chart here that kind of explains what we just said. And the only real difference here, the only addition here is you'll see there's a dotted line in the fourth bubble where it says finance holds public hearing and reviews the budget and proposes modifications. You'll see a dotted line back to the mayor. That's kind of a back and forth negotiation between the finance committee and the mayor to discuss those modifications that we were talking about. They're kind of unofficial until it gets finally approved by the city council. But this is where a lot of the sausage is made.
That's great.
And if it's rejected, it goes back to the mayor, and the process starts over again.
Let me ask a couple of questions. First, can you give us just some basic stats about the budget? Like, how big is the City of Malden budget? How much does the City of Malden spend in a year?
We're a rather large operation. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but we're around $190 million annual budget.
Yeah, wow, that's huge. And the biggest part of that is the schools, right?
Yes.
And the schools department runs through the city budget, and that's something like 70 or 80 million dollars is a part of that city budget that goes straight to the schools. And what's their process? How do they figure into this?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because I've never served on the school committee. A lot of my colleagues have, like Councillor DeMaria has served on the school committee. The school committee comes up with its own budget, and the way that starts is the mayor gives the superintendent a number that he needs to manage to. And so, Mayor Christenson says, we've gotten this much in state aid, and we are going to be putting this much of our own tax dollars in locally. So this is the number you need to manage to. And then the superintendent will draft a budget to the school committee, which the mayor is the chair of. And then the school committee will then have their internal discussion about where they're going to prioritize the funds based on what the superintendent says. And they go through their own process of cuts, transfers, additions, and then they provide that final, proposed budget to the city council. And the city council's only role at that point is to either approve the budget presented by the school committee as presented, or to cut that budget. I'm not familiar with the city council, at least in my tenure, cutting the school department.
Right. So it's like its own nested process inside this of its own, getting that budget figure. So let me ask you a question. Where did these budget figures come from? How does the city know how much money it expects to spend?
Yeah, so that's actually another great question. Prop 2.5 was passed by the Massachusetts legislature, which pretty much said that property taxes in a particular community cannot be increased more than 2.5% each year. And that doesn't mean that your particular property increases 2.5%. That means that the overall tax levy can only increase 2.5%. So our revenues are pretty much restricted to that 2.5% growth. The only other variable there is new growth. So if you have a new construction project or some other type of development happen, that is over and above that 2.5%. Another example could be excise tax. We're talking about doing a citywide parking program. If more people start registering their cars here in Malden, then we could see growth in that respect. So the mayor and his team, they look at what we are bringing in. They look at what we spent the last year, And they allocate the funds. You know, if there's more funds to be spent, they allocate it based on what their priorities are as an administration.
Gotcha. So the number one source of income for the city is those local property taxes that you're talking about, and that's property taxes for residential, for housing, as well as commercial, right? And if you really want to get into the weeds, anybody can go to I know cityofmalden.org/budget and then just download all the details and see all the details about how the budget, what departments are getting what amount of money. And so if you look at the budget, it looks like for this year, the year we're in right now, property tax gives a little under $100 million to the city budget. And then there's this piece called state aid, which looks like it's just under $70 million. Can you tell us what state aid is?
Yeah, so state aid is well, before we go to state aid, really quickly, one other component of the property tax is personal property tax. So that doesn't apply to like your residential home, but that does apply to businesses. So if you say you operate a factory in Malden, you have all this like really high tech equipment, that equipment has a value. You're also paying a personal property tax on that. And in addition, there's another weird connection that people don't necessarily make. Utility companies pay taxes for their infrastructure that they have in our community. So, the fact that we had 100-year-old, gas mains and electrical lines means that those assets have been depreciated by that utility company, and they were probably paying almost nothing in personal property tax to the city of Malden. So by, forcing, these utility companies to improve and reinvest in their infrastructure, not only does it make our community safer by making sure we don't have explosions like you saw in the Merrimack Valley, but it also is going to bring in more property taxes for the city because there's additional value there.
Well, that's great to know.
From your question regarding state aid, usually here you have things about like Chapter 70 or Chapter 90. School aid, which has its own formula, it comes down through Chapter 70. Chapter 90 is money that the mayor has to spend on roads and improvement of roads and other transportation infrastructure. He has the sole discretion about how those funds are used. The city council doesn't have to approve that. And then there's unrestricted state aid, which is just given to the city, and the city can choose to spend it however it sees fit.
Right. Well, that's helpful to know. And then you get, some estimates from the state about how much that is and build that in. And then we do our own estimates, like you said, based on those rules about how much property tax money we expect to come in, right?
Yeah. The state has a kind of strange process that I don't really completely understand. Where in Malden, the executive or the mayor is the start of that process for a budget. Mm-hmm. The governor does present a budget, but it's almost just like ceremonial to let people know what his priorities are. But the budget process at the state level starts in the House of Representatives.
Gotcha. And then there's other money that the city gets through things like fees and permits and your car registration, the car registration thing. So that looks like that's about $14 million for about $184 million, as you said, for this year. And, I think just one thing that's probably important for people to understand is that, so all the money that comes in, some of it is really restricted to certain things, like you said, right? You can go to the school, but that doesn't mean that you could ever take money from what's going to, trash pickup, where we have fees for trash pickup, and then shift that money to the fire department or something like that. So not all of that money can be moved around, right?
Yeah, well, any revenue that we receive does go into the general fund. So revenue just goes straight to the general fund unless it's like some special situation. But we do have certain types of liabilities and things that we absolutely need to spend our money on. So for instance, debt. We built a new school, we revamped a school. We do get a rating from the credit rating agencies. And that determines how much we can borrow money for. So it is important that we pay back our debt. So obviously that's something that can't necessarily be, just given away or not paid. The health insurance for our employees, we have to provide health insurance for our employees, both legally as well as morally. So there are just certain, things that we cannot really modify.
Yeah, gotcha. I wonder if you could stop screen share, and I kind of want to ask you about the way that people can engage with the budget process. So there's a lot of complication here for $184 million, organizations. Like, that's not surprising, but how can people best engage with this process about how the city is spending their money, our money?
I'd say the first step is engaging with the mayor and the mayor's office. There is a bad habit of people, elected officials just kind of pointing the fingers at other elected officials when people ask, like, how can we help influence something? But with the budget specifically, it starts with the mayor. So having a clear conversation and dialogue with the mayor's office is really going to be the first step of influencing the process. The other benefit there is you're dealing with one person. The city council is 11 people. The school committee is not 9 people. So, like, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of herd the cats than it is to just have a conversation with the mayor about what priorities are.
So anybody can email the mayor. I mean, he actually responds to a lot of emails. I've emailed the mayor, and anybody can email that, and then can email the mayor. And then once the mayor has sent his budget proposal to city council, there are public hearings, right?
Yeah, and that's actually a great way I think we can improve the process. Right now the way the public hearing process is, and I don't think it's because of any individual councilor or any individual chair of finance. I think it's just been how it always has been. Right now we use the hearing process almost like as a checkbox of the fact that we need to legally do it, but it usually happens at the end of the budgeting process, right before we pass the annual budget. And maybe, Councillor Murphy, as chair of finance, can change that process to have the public hearing at the beginning of the process so we can hear from our constituents about what they're thinking and where they would like to see us prioritize our funds. So I would say participate in a public hearing when we have it, hopefully at the beginning of the process, if not in the middle or the end. Usually there's only about one person that attends and testifies at a public hearing on the budget.
Well, let's see if we can get that number up this year. And those public hearings have been happening online, right, for the last year because of the pandemic. So anybody can join, like, the Zoom meeting, or they can send their comments in or email their city councilor as well. So I think it's actually been great that we can have more people come to the hearings because they're online. So I hope there's a way that can, even continue after.
Absolutely. I think that the Zoom, the whole Zoom phenomena has helped really, I think, bring accessibility to people who might not have been able to physically get out of their homes to participate. So I hope that when we do end up going back to, the new normal, maybe back in person at some point, we keep some type of digital participation platform.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, any other words of wisdom that you have to our residents and community members in Malden as they're, trying to engage with the city process around the budget, the city council process, the hearings, like, just any other parting thoughts you want to leave folks with?
This is 2021. So we have municipal elections on odd years. So this is an election year for the city council and the school committee. So, people are going to be particularly motivated and going to be listening really intently to their constituents this year. So this would be the year to really get to know your city councilor, get to know your school committee member, get to know the mayor, and have a conversation with them about what your priorities are, and about how we can improve the operation for all of our community. I think that would be my parting words of wisdom. People are motivated.
Well, thanks for that. And that's a big part of why we want to do this people's budget process, to help pull some of those voices together and point them in the right direction, and then help people connect with those opportunities for public engagement, and present that in a way that's useful. We're hoping to be able to send some information, before the budget, to send a report about that before the budget is actually proposed. We're asking people to complete the survey, I think, by March 1, and then, help them connect to the process as it goes through. So I'm hopeful we can help build that across the city.
Absolutely. Let me know if there's anything that I can do on my end to help with explaining the process, if there are any other follow-up questions. But thank you again for giving me the opportunity to kind of digest this. It also, I think, was helpful for me to kind of analyze the process and really think about, when should these dates be happening? Because none of them are really set in stone by ordinance. They're usually just based on when the mayor sends down the budget. So I think kind of setting these best practices is crucial.
Except for that June 30, right? That one.
Yeah, that's an important date.
That's a critical one. All right.
Exactly.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.